Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. So, the UK's exit from the EU is now all but certain, and attention in 2020 has to turn firmly to another act of national humiliation, namely watching Boris Johnson try to negotiate for the world and come away with, well, not that. And this week he has been revealing his master plan. But first, if you'd like notifications of daily news and political commentary, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So yes, Boris Johnson has a plan for negotiations. That's good. I'm pleased about that, because I was getting a little bit worried he was going to be a bit like David Davis, who initially tried to go to the wrong country for talks, and then when he found his way to the right place, turned up without any notes at all. So it's at least better than that. It is important to note, however, that when I say plan, I am using an extremely charitable frame of mind to do so. And also has to be said that this is still being discussed in Cabinet, so it's not necessarily the modus operandum for negotiations just yet. And the plan is essentially this: to hold parallel talks with the EU and the US at the same time. Now, apart from the fact, I'm not sure, given that the UK independently has not negotiated any trade agreements for a couple of generations, does this assume that we have two very strong negotiating teams to negotiate with the two largest economies in the world? But let's say we do. The idea, if we can remain charitable and call it that, is that we play both off against each other. Now, I'm not entirely sure how that's supposed to work when you consider the following. So first of all, from the EU's point of view, they cannot weaken the integrity of their single market for any price that the UK can pay. This is something that a lot of Brexiteers struggle to get to grips with, but it's very important that they try. We are not worth as much as the rest of the EU put together, let alone the rest of the EU put together, plus all of the other economies that have an agreement with the EU that depends upon access to that single market being as it is. We're simply not powerful enough to get our own way on that. So if we want access to the single market, we follow the rules that ensure that that market is not tainted. Then the second thing to consider from the United States point of view is they refuse to agree to any deal with us if we arrange a deal with the EU. Now, on paragraph 2 of America's demands for a trade deal with us, they highlight how having a common trade policy with the EU makes it impossible for them to get what they want. Upon further reading the document, and it is worth a read if you haven't already, it was published nearly a year ago, it is clear that a free trade agreement with the US and the EU is mutually exclusive. In fact, if we so much as touch the American trade deal, then despite what Boris says about no checks up the Irish Sea, there will be full checks taking place up the border in the Irish Sea that he said he would never agree to, by the way, or Northern Ireland will be cut off. And then, of course, all hell will break loose. The problem is that some of the key Brexiteers in the Conservative Party, and indeed elsewhere, but it's the ones in the Conservative Party that have the power, fail to understand that both the US and the EU have their red lines. And I mean real red lines, not the ones that Theresa May randomly drew in to appease the ERG. Maybe therein lies the problem. They think that because they made up their red lines and they're not real, that the EU and the US are doing the same thing. But the EU cannot compromise on the integrity of the single market. That is not a negotiating position. Their own businesses, member parliaments and trading partners insist upon it. All of the political pressure on the EU is retaining the integrity of the single market, every single bit of pressure. Also, the US cannot compromise on their need to export goods that currently do not meet our standards. Powerful lobby groups for farmers and drug manufacturers in particular will not allow it. And to throw another spanner in the works, if we adopt a US trade agreement and we don't put checks on the border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK, then checks will have to take place between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Now, that would be a breach of the Good Friday Agreement, and the US Congress has already made it crystal clear that they will not approve any US trade deal that does so, under pressure from the Irish lobby in America, of course. So it's impossible to get that US trade deal as it stands. Completely impossible. In other words, the whole situation is very, very messy. And this idea of trying to play one side off against the other cannot possibly work, because it means asking impossible things of not one, but two of the largest economies in the world. In fact, the two largest economies in the world. I mean, you have to admire Johnson for his desire to punch above his weight, but I fear this is really like an aging prize fighter trying to take on Floyd Mayweather. It's not really going to happen. And it is telling that it's the likes of Dominic Raab and Liz Truss who are reported to be in favour of this plan. They are easily the two dumbest members of cabinet. And there are others, apparently, in the cabinet who are very much opposed to this plan. So perhaps there are some ministers with not only some brains, but a genuine desire to get a deal with the EU. Not much good if they're going to be outnumbered by the lunatics. We'll have to see what happens. So that is the current thinking about our negotiating strategy right now. Yes, it's disappointing that they haven't come up with a negotiating strategy until, well, they haven't even come up with one now, technically. They're just thinking about it. You'd have thought they've had over 3.5 years to think about it. We're supposed to have been thinking about Brexit for all that time. But better late than never, I suppose. Better late than never. Maybe they'll actually think about what they want from a trade deal with the EU and the US as well. That would be nice. They still haven't published any ideas on that. But we will see. We'll see. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for details as well. And until next time, I'll see you later.